Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. So last night at about midnight, I finished watching the documentary The Last Dance, which is about Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. And it is incredible. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. Just trust me on that, it really is good. But in today's episode, I want to talk to you about the 3 top takeaways or lessons that I got from watching it. So the first big takeaway I got was that as naturally gifted as Michael Jordan was, that wasn't his biggest secret to success. It was his why. Having a really powerful why is more important than anything. And let me explain. So as a kid, there was this story that his father was telling about how there was Michael Jordan, there was his older brother, and his father was saying that Michael, when it came to things like mechanics and the typical more masculine activities, Michael Jordan came out and his father said, hey, just hand me that Phillips screwdriver. And Michael Jordan brings him some other thing and his father was like, oh, you're useless, get back in the kitchen. And Michael Jordan told the story of how that kind of made him feel almost inferior to his older brother, like he was living in his older brother's shadow. And he desperately craved the approval from his father, but it was very deep-seated with him. So he turned to sports. That became his area where he was going to be incredible. He was going to take it as far as he possibly could. And getting his father's approval, that was everything. And all throughout his career, right up to the point where his father was unfortunately murdered, that really drove him. And even after that, his father was a really important part of his life. But the real lesson was that as naturally talented as Michael Jordan was, there's a lot of athletes out there. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who have natural talent, but that why was the #1 contributor to his success. It wasn't natural talent. In high school, Michael Jordan actually got cut. He didn't make the final team. And he went home crying about it to his mother, and his mother said, well, what are you gonna do about it? You've got 2 choices. You can either kind of give up or you can work really, really hard. So over those next few months, that's what he did. He obsessively worked at it. Came back the next year, made the team, and then he made it into college basketball. He got the whole scholarship. And there's a story told from another college basketball player. He says that he was better than Michael Jordan. But then he adds,
for about 3 weeks.
what was so impressive was that the rate at which he improved, no one had ever seen it before. He improved faster than anyone else because he was so dedicated. That why was so important to him. There's plenty of talented people out there who have these natural gifts, but really at the end of the day, it's about hard work. It is about extreme obsession and dedication, and those things will always be natural talent. The second big takeaway that I got was that nothing less than 100% would do. So there were several stories throughout this whole series about where the Chicago Bulls, they were down in a game and it looked like it was impossible to win. They were so far behind. What every other player said about Michael Jordan, and everyone said, was that you never saw Michael Jordan give anything less than 100%. There was never a day where things weren't going well and he said, oh, okay, I'll give this 70% and that will do. Nothing less than 100% was acceptable. And this was for a number of reasons. #1, when someone came to those stands to watch, if they'd never seen him play, to him it was incredibly important that if you were going there to see Michael Jordan play for the first time, he was giving you his very best. It was an experience. He was going to give you his very best, and there was no such thing as 70% perfection, 80%. It was always 100% intensity. And the other reason was he refused to lose. No matter what, it was all about winning at all costs. There was this one game that they were talking about where this was their final game, and I'm not really a basketball guy, so I don't know all the details of how it works, but this was like their final game in the entire season. And they're down. They're so far behind that it looks like it's an unwinnable game. And the general manager, Jerry someone, I forget his last name, but basically he was willing to accept that they lose, because if they lost, then they would get the draft lottery. They would get put in this draft lottery, which meant that they would get to choose one of the best future college players for the recruiting. So they kind of wanted them to just lose. They were so far behind, and that became acceptable. Michael Jordan refused to lose. After halftime, he goes in, and that really pissed him off. Like when he was telling that story where management was okay with throwing the game or losing, to him, it was never acceptable to lose, no matter what the other benefits were. That went against every core principle in his being. Never to lose, always win. Now, the third and final takeaway was that as a leader, Michael Jordan was incredibly hard on his team. And that was like a common theme throughout the whole documentary. He was a bit of a tyrant, and a lot of his teammates, they talked about how when they were going through the trainings with him, he wasn't an enjoyable fellow teammate to be around. He was incredibly hard on them. And there was this one particular story about the Australian player Steve Kerr, and they're in this really intense training, and they get into this altercation, and Steve Kerr just hits Michael Jordan, I think in the stomach, and Michael Jordan hits him back, gets thrown out of the training, later kind of calls up and apologizes. But he was so intense that even during a training with his own teammates, this was the kind of thing that would happen. And so in this documentary, occasionally the interviewer would hand an iPad to Michael Jordan and show him a little scene from another player about what they said about him. And so in this one kind of emotional scene, they give the iPad to Michael Jordan, and he's hearing all of this, not criticism, but his players are talking about just how much of a tyrant and how intense and just the pressure that he would put on that. And he gets kind of emotional. You can see the tears welling up in his eyes. And he says, I never asked a single player on my team to do a thing that I wasn't willing to do myself. I worked just as hard. I was harder on myself than I was on any other team member. And so the lesson that I got from that was that as much of a tyrant as he could be, he put more pressure on himself, and he expected more of himself than he did anyone else. He led by example. He was the definition of leading by example. Okay, so those are just 3 takeaways that I got. I actually got a lot more. And again, if you haven't seen it, go and check it out. Trust me, it's really good. It's on Netflix. I'm actually going to watch it for a second time. Okay, so that's it for today. I look forward to talking with you tomorrow. Until then, speak soon.